Hey everybody, this is Levi Valentine, the host of the Fantasy Players Club podcast, at Levi_Valentine on Twitter. Joining me is my co-host, Brent Hut Hikes, at Brent Hikes, Heikes on Twitter. Brent, how are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Just got done playing a cornhole game outside with the family.
Did you
I
win?
lost. So they beat me. That hurt. I'm a pretty competitive person, and my wife beat me too. So that's not good.
Was it close?
Yeah, it was close. At least it was
Okay.
close.
So it's kind of like this startup draft we're doing then, where I'm just destroying you. Except it's a little closer than that, maybe.
I guess so.
Brett
So
and I are in the middle of our 12-team Superflex startup draft. And so Brent had third overall pick.
Yep.
And I was in the 11th slot. And we are about halfway through our 13th round, starting the 14th now. So we will probably get into that on future episodes.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the inaugural episode. I am very excited. I think Brent is too.
Yes.
This has been a long time coming. We've been working diligently. We've got our website up, fantasyplayersclub.com. If you haven't checked it out yet, go take a look. It looks pretty good. Pretty sexy website. Brent's written a couple blogs already. You wrote one today, didn't you, Brent?
Yes. JT Daniels made a decision to go to Georgia. So somewhat big for Devy players out there.
Certainly. That'll definitely get some Devy attention. Maybe not this year if he sits out, as you note in your blog, that due to the redshirt transfer rule. But in future years, he could be taking over there and have a pretty big impact. There's a lot of talent that's gone to Georgia over the past few years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, thinking 2021, which is next year, they got a 5-star coming in. So he'll definitely have some competition. So,
yeah.
Like I said in the blog, we can probably expect another transfer out of that maybe this time next year.
Yeah.
Once it becomes more clear on the quarterback race.
Yeah. Brock Vandegrift is the 5-star you referenced, I believe, correct?
Yep.
That's very exciting. So maybe we should talk about what we're going to cover within this podcast and this episode and future episodes. So to give you all a little background on that, Brent and I have been playing fantasy together for a few years now. Brent is the commissioner of the Dynasty League that was actually my first Dynasty League that I joined, called The Program, going into year 14 this year, Brent?
Yes, 14. 14 years.
Hard to believe. And who won that league last year, Brent?
Jeez. I got to admit, that was pretty impressive what you did. You were probably the worst team 2 years ago. Then last year you turn around and win the championship. You don't see that very often.
You're being generous. Cool. I was by far the worst team. I was 0-13.
Yeah.
But
it helped that you had Lamar Jackson, though.
That helped a ton.
We'll see if he can do it again next year.
It is a 16-team league, so having a player like Lamar goes a long way towards crawling out of the cellar and being competitive again. But to start, we wanted to give you all a little bit of background on us and what we do outside of fantasy football, and a little bit about how we got into fantasy, how long we've been playing, and a few other topics that we'll get to down the road. But first, I want to turn it over to Brent to talk a little bit about his background and his fantasy history.
All right. Well, I'm a 5th grade teacher at Nebraska, at Grand Island. Been teaching just finished my 4th year teaching. I've been playing fantasy football since high school, which was probably the late 90s. I think 1999 is when Yahoo started offering fantasy football, and it was the coolest thing. Back then, still a lot of friends from the program league that were in. We were playing fantasy football in 1999. That was a lot of fun, and it's just grown ever since. It's grown a ridiculous amount. That was back then when it was redraft. Now we're getting into Dynasty, Devy, daily fantasy. It's just crazy to see how it's grown.
So you started redraft leagues in 1999, and you were how old at that point?
I had to be a sophomore in high school.
Okay. And then in 2006, I guess if I did the math
Yep,
correctly, then is when the program started, and that was your
yep,
first Dynasty League.
yep, yep.
And was Dynasty pretty new at that point, or had it been
It,
around a little while?
it was very new. I remember when I started it, I didn't know much about it. I didn't know if it actually work out because I liked redraft so much. I never knew I'd like playing Dynasty fantasy football. So I'm glad I did, though.
Yeah. So at that point, when you started your Dynasty League, you were just finishing up college, starting your professional career?
I took a different path. I went to college for a year at a high school. Got married, started a family. Then I actually went to college again, probably about 8 years ago, to be a teacher,
Wow.
and here I am today.
So what'd you do before you taught?
I worked at call centers. I worked for the U.S. Post Office. Yeah, that's
Very
pretty
cool.
much it.
So what I thought I was going to get to was maybe these, because there are 16 people as we mentioned in the program. Yeah, so that's quite a few people to have in a
hmm
fantasy league, especially a dynasty league. So were those all people that you knew from high school, from maybe college, or just from your career?
There is a couple of them. I'd say probably about 4 to 5 of them I knew from high school. A couple of them are a little bit older than me. Couple even younger than me. Um, and there's also a few of them that worked with me at a call center up in
Okay,
Vermillion, South Dakota. We've all moved on. That call center is no longer there anymore. I know there's some of them living like in Minnesota, Arizona. Some of them might be in Sioux Falls, I think it was, but we've all moved around, and
gotcha.
it's just kind of cool to see it all grow.
So do they know? They all know each other, or you're the common thread between everybody?
Um, I would say kind of like I mean, when you joined the program, I didn't know you. I knew you from Colin.
Yeah.
So Colin got into the league probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. Um, so we did lose a few people throughout the 14 years, but I would say at least half of them have been there the whole time.
It's impressive.
hmm
So you started that one in 2006, and then did you play any other dynasty leagues, or was it just kind of redraft in that league from then till now?
I started a new dynasty league couple years. I want to say like 4 years ago, and it was just some guy. I forgot his name. Some guy I follow him on Twitter. He wanted to start a new dynasty superflex with fans and a few other fantasy writers, and somehow I got into it. I asked Jesse Jelinek. He's in our program league. So we both got into that, and that's been a pretty competitive league. There's some pretty good players in there. Jesse has probably got the best of me in that league, but I definitely got the best of Jesse in the program league the last 14 years.
Oh, that's awesome. So when did you start playing DFS or daily fantasy sports?
I probably did that. Um, I probably started 5, 6 years ago
Okay.
on DraftKings. That's another thing that's really growing a lot, and I look forward to doing that every fall.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get you to do that too.
Yeah.
Get you hooked on it.
So, do you play college fantasy football as well?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I've tried it. It just I just don't follow it. I mean, I follow college football quite a bit, but I don't follow it like I do NFL fantasy.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. It's just maybe there's more players in college. So,
But you
but
do participate in a Devi league that you
yes,
started a few years ago.
Debbie is big. I don't know why it's I don't know why it's like that, but the actual college fantasy portion of it, I'm just not a big fan. But Debbie, when you include that in the NFL fantasy, That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And you would know, what do you think of it?
Devy, I really enjoy. I actually started playing college fantasy football before we started our Devy League. And so that, I think, helped a lot with just the familiarity with the players and knowing who was going to be productive and those types of things for the rookie drafts for the program, but also for the Devy League going in.
Mm-hmm.
You hear it a lot, and I agree with it, that joining a Devy League, or I think playing college fantasy football also, is probably one of the best things you can do if you are in a Dynasty League, because instead of having to learn everything about these rookies every year before the draft, you have some background knowledge on where they went to school, how productive they've been, what their strengths and weaknesses are, all of that stuff prior to starting your research for that rookie draft. And of course, things change during the draft process as you go through the combine and pro days and seeing what draft capital each of these players gets. Certainly changes the calculus a little bit, but just having that background knowledge is a huge advantage as opposed to starting from zero.
Yeah, I agree.
So anything else you want to add, Brent, before we move on about your background and your experience with fantasy to date, other than stuff we'll get into later?
Nothing. I have 2 daughters. They can drive me crazy sometimes, but they're pretty fun to be around, though. So
yeah.
I live a pretty boring life.
Yeah.
And
a lovely wife, right? A lovely wife also.
I have a lovely wife, Lacey. I wonder if she'll even listen, but thanks
She's
for listening,
all
Lacey,
in.
if you do. I did get her to follow us on Twitter. So she's one of our 9 followers now on Twitter. So
and she likes us on Facebook. She liked our post earlier about recording this episode.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Tell me about your life. Tell me about how you started in fantasy.
So I grew up in a small town called Ravenna, Nebraska, in the central part, actually not too far from Grand Island, where you live and teach now. I started playing fantasy football probably in junior high, so 13, 14, which would have been 2003 or 4. In just a redraft league, a seasonal league with my friends. One of my friends who's in this Superflex league that we're doing actually started at Trevin. And it's all people from our school. And we've had the league together for the past 15 plus years now at this point, probably. And for the most part, the owners have stayed the same. We've had a few changes, but it's been a lot of fun over the years. And that was my first real introduction. I'd been in other redraft type leagues, but a few years ago when I joined the program, that was my first Dynasty League. And I was familiar with the concept, but I never had enough people that I knew that would want to do it to warrant making a Dynasty League. And so Colin kept telling me about Dynasty, and I knew a little bit about it otherwise too from hearing other podcasts talk about it. And I said, if you ever need somebody, if somebody drops out or whatever, I want to join one. And so finally he sent me the invitation for the program, and I was happy to take over an orphan team and claw my way out of a hole. But it's been a lot of fun. So that was my first Dynasty experience. I've had a few championships along the way in the redraft league, and now I guess my first Dynasty one last year, and participate in the same Devy league like we mentioned. I've done college fantasy football because I posted on a message board with a bunch of guys, and we had a college fantasy football league, and I've been fortunate and won that. Also play fantasy baseball when the season is actually happening. We have a long-term keeper league where you can keep guys up to 4 years. I've actually won that each of the last 3 years, kind of a dynasty. So this year it'll be interesting. If we come back with a short season, they'll have a pretty good chance to dethrone me because there'll be a lot of random bounces in a shortened season.
They really need to get it going and stop arguing about money and get it playing. I mean, I'd even watch baseball right now. I mean, I'm really starving for sports. So.
Yeah, I wonder. It'll be interesting to see who comes back first between baseball and basketball.
Yeah. I can see basketball coming back with just like playoffs, maybe a few more teams, like a few play-in games.
Yeah.
But I think Steve Kerr said this was like last month that they said that they're done with the season. So I assume they want to be done so they can get that first pick for next year. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and hockey's announced that they're done with their regular season, so I guess that kind of sets the precedent.
Yeah.
Outside of fantasy, I work as a bank examiner. We examine all the national banks, so I travel a fair amount for that and get to go to a lot of cool places, some not so cool places that I'd probably rather not go, but it keeps things interesting that way. And then I have a lovely wife also, and 2 boys. We just had our second boy in February, so about
Awesome.
3 months in and starting to get a little bit of a routine and get into the sleep schedule. Last time, our first was a premature baby, about a month, and so we had to spend some time in the NICU to start, and then we didn't go anywhere because he was born in October and it was cold and flu season, and Shelly was so scared of him getting sick and something happening that for the first few months we didn't hardly go anywhere. And then this time we had the COVID-19 and a global pandemic. And so we're like, oh, this time will be great. Like flu season's almost over. We'll get to go places. It'll be so much nicer. Get to go outside. And then we have a global pandemic and we don't get to go. We probably go even less places than we did with Owen. So I told her we probably shouldn't have a third because God knows what'll happen if we do.
Yeah,
but they're great. I love them. Owen, he's 2.5 now, so he keeps things entertaining to say the least.
Good.
So, what to expect from this podcast going forward? We've put some thought into that. I think we've know for sure that we're both very passionate about dynasty football, dynasty leagues, and so that'll be probably first and foremost as far as our approach to and our spin that we put on things, whether it be news or players or team strategy or team building, trade analysis, all of that type of stuff. Dynasty will be a primary topic on this podcast.
And I think in the off season, like basically from February to like July, I'd say we're going to talk a lot about the incoming rookies because a lot of people will be doing their rookie drafts. So I assume we'll be talking a lot of rookies. Like we're going to do, I think in our next podcast, we're going to talk about the rookies. Or do you want to wait till later?
Let's dive into those rookies. I think that's what people are trying to figure out right now is like get ready for their drafts. So that will be a hot topic, certainly. Mm-hmm. Beyond Dynasty, we'll certainly talk about redraft as well, especially as the season gets closer and help people prepare for those drafts. As you heard, we both participate in redraft leagues, so that's something that's also foremost at the front of our mind. And as these stories come in, I think we'll probably talk a little bit about, of course, the Dynasty impact, but also redraft and how that could affect player value. We'll probably have some Devy episodes, so you heard that we both participate in a Devy league. Highly recommend it, and we'll see. We may try to cut those out as separate episodes where all we talk about is Devy, or where that's the primary topic, or we may weave a segment in here or there into our normal podcast. We'll just kind of see how that goes. But we're going to cover Devy, and then Brent also has DFS experience and plays and is apparently going to get me to play. So we will be maybe we'll have lessons in DFS from Brent as part of these episodes as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I do like daily fantasy. I play DraftKings and FanDuel, so we'll talk about like the whole weekend games, or we can talk about the individual games, or we'll talk like who should we choose as a captain and etc.
Yeah,
it'll be fun.
Can't wait. One of the things I think is important to note, and for you all to know as an audience, is that we are going to create episodes that consist of several different segments that are relatively short. And so if we're doing a segment that doesn't interest you, whether it be a certain topic, if you've only played redraft or seasonal leagues and we're talking about something with Dynasty, you can skip ahead to that next segment and there will probably be something relevant for you in that show still. So we'll make it easy for you to hop around and find what you need or what's valuable to you. You don't have to worry about, oh, this whole episode is not relevant to me, or unless it is a case where we break out, for example, a Devi themed episode, then you can just skip that one altogether. But if we're talking about a certain player or something that doesn't interest you, skip ahead, and maybe there'll be a mailbag question that's related to something that you're interested in, or maybe it'll be a different player or a team building strategy or something. We'll make it easy on you, I guess, as a listener to find something that interests you and is entertaining. So that's kind of what we envision for the podcast. Is we envision a variety of quick segments, easy to navigate. We envision covering Dynasty, Devi, Redraft, and DFS. Probably more heavy on the Dynasty aspect, but still certainly covering all of those topics. And we envision making it fun and entertaining. I think a lot of podcasts get very heavy on the numbers, very heavy on the analysis, pretty light on the humor and entertainment angle. And that's something that's important to us, is we want it to be enjoyable and educational. I put together our bios on our social media, and I said, fantasy football is supposed to be fun. That's why we all play. And in the Fantasy Players Club, it will be. So, go ahead.
I'm excited.
Me too. So with that in mind, we put together a few segments actually for this episode. This will give you some entertainment, hopefully, and also help you learn a little bit more about us as hosts. So I have a few questions here I'm going to ask Brent, and I'll chime in as well. But Brent, what's your favorite type of fantasy league to play in?
Favorite type of fantasy league is Dynasty. I just like to, when I pick a player or trade for a player, it just feels different because you have that player for the rest of his playing career, unless you end up dropping him or trading him yourself. But I just think Dynasty is a lot of fun because you just don't trash that team at the end of the year. You're making a big decision that's going to affect years down the road. So that's why I like Dynasty. I would say my next favorite is Daily Fantasy because, for example, you might be watching a Thursday night football game. You might not have any of your Dynasty players playing in that game, but you can do your own little daily fantasy and just do fantasy just for that game, and that makes the game much, much more fun to watch. So that's why I like daily fantasy next.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree with you. I think Dynasty has quickly become my favorite. My friends were shocked when I told them that I'm now in 4 Dynasty leagues. I had several friends that are playing Dynasty for the first time as part of the Superflex draft with us, and I think that hopefully they'll end up in the same boat. But I think it's like playing chess as opposed to seasonal leagues, are more like checkers. Like there's a fair amount of luck involved in seasonal leagues. It's entertaining, but it's certainly not as important to everybody who plays, and the stakes are usually not as high. And so I think that makes Dynasty more interesting. And like you said, you have a chance to think long term, to make really a lot more interesting trades. Owners are usually a lot more engaged, which all makes the experience of playing much more enjoyable. So Dynasty by far. And then Devi really takes that to the next level. I guess Devi is a kind of Dynasty league, but I think that it's even more hardcore. So when you're drafting college players and you're trying to monitor all of the NFL stuff too, and you're trying to balance those players on your Devi roster with the needs of your Dynasty roster, and whether you're going for it this year or you're building for a year or two down the road, and having that pipeline set up the way you want it to be, it's just a whole nother layer on top of that. And so I really enjoy that as well.
And I should include, I consider Devi as just like something additional on top of Dynasty. I do like Devi quite a bit. I mean, if I were to choose Dynasty or Devi, I'd like the Devi. I mean, that's having that extra, getting those college players on your roster. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we should probably mention we're both pretty big Nebraska football fans. It's been a rough few years, but
Few years. It's been a rough 20 years. Come on.
At least you were old enough to remember the
Yeah.
glory years. Like I remember '97 and watching us whoop Peyton Manning, or watching Nebraska whoop Peyton Manning in the Orange Bowl to win that last national championship. But I have pretty limited memory of '94, '95, and all of the other years in the '90s where they were maybe a break or two here or there from playing for a championship every year.
I would say back when I was, I was 10 through 16. For those 6 years, I was pretty spoiled as a Nebraska fan, and I think that might have hurt me come now, because I mean, I expect them to be great all the time because I was spoiled so much in my early years. So I just always want to win. But I understand that it does take time. But I do feel me being spoiled back in the '90s with the Huskers winning all the time, it really hurt the way I look at them today.
Yeah, I think the number one misconception about being a Nebraska fan is that outsiders think we all expect it to go back to being the way it was in the '90s. I don't think anybody realistically expects that at this point, but I think people would be fine with what happened the 25 or 30 years before the '90s, where Nebraska was consistently good, winning 9 or 10 games in a year, where that was a real accomplishment. And you know, maybe they didn't win. I mean, they won the championships in '70 and '71, but they were competitive every single year. They were not losing more than 2 or 3 games. They were winning conference championships and playing in high quality bowls. It's not like the '90s just came out of nowhere. There was a consistent winning culture at Nebraska for a period of 30, 40 years. The '90s were the peak of that, but to just act like that was this moment in time that came out of nowhere and will never again be possible, and that even something like what we saw in the '80s or late '70s isn't possible again, I think is misguided and kind of a misperception about Nebraska fans in general.
I'd have to agree with you there. If they can just being competitive, that's really what I want to see, and I think they're getting there. I've been saying that for years, but I think with Frost, he'll get them to be competitive.
I mean, really, I feel like there's no reason Nebraska can't be what Wisconsin is.
Yeah.
Barry Alvarez went to Wisconsin with the Nebraska blueprint and built that program into what it is today, using them as a model. And Barry's a Nebraska guy with Nebraska roots. So there's nothing preventing that from happening. And I think at this point, all Nebraska fans would be more than happy to be in that situation.
I agree.
Anyway, that was our Nebraska detour.
We might have a few of those coming up.
Some of those might get left on the cutting room floor in the editing process. The next segment we're going to do is favorite fantasy players. So I can start this one. Currently, my favorite fantasy player is Lamar Jackson, a player I was fortunate enough to draft in the program league. One. So in that league, we have 16 teams. This was the first year I joined the league before I played my first season. The team I inherited was pretty bad, and I had the third overall pick, which was the Saquon Barkley draft. So he went number 1, and Darius Geis tore his ACL prior to our draft and still went number 2, which really disappointed me because I was like, I know I'm not going to win it this year anyway. So if him missing that whole year was not a big deal to me. So I was like, if he falls to 3, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then after that, you had your choice of Rashad Penny, which is who I ended up taking. I should have taken Nick Chubb, who was also available in that draft. There was Sonny Michel. There was Ronald Jones. Those were probably the primary players I considered. But then I think it was my second round pick was Lamar Jackson. So that draft also had 5 high-profile quarterbacks. There was Sam Darnold. There was Josh Rosen. There was Baker Mayfield. And there was Lamar Jackson. And who was the other one?
Can't remember.
Can't remember either. but Lamar slipped to the second round, and I was like, okay, I was really hoping for Baker Mayfield, who I think ended up going before that, but Lamar fell to me, and I took him, and it's been incredible ever since. So
good pick so far.
yeah, it's worked out pretty well, and I drafted Mark Andrews in the third round. That also worked out. So that was a great draft, and those are, as a result, two of my favorite fantasy players.
Awesome.
What about you, Brent?
Can I pick two?
Absolutely.
All right. I'll pick a current one and one back in the day. Current one, it's got to be Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's so fun to watch.
He is.
I mean, I feel he's must-see TV whenever the Chiefs play.
Showtime.
He can make all the passes, Super Bowl winning quarterback. Just a lot of fun. He's on two of my fantasy teams now, so that's huge. Especially it's huge to have him in a super flex. I got him with my third pick in the current super flex league that we're doing right now. Favorite all-time fantasy player and probably NFL player. You're going to think I'm crazy on this one. But let me give you a little background first. I love the wide receiver position. I love route running. It's just something that I've always been fascinated by. Reggie Wayne. He was on my fantasy team. He's been on probably most of my fantasy teams, even in redrafts. He's been on my dynasty teams. He's always been there. I mean, having Peyton Manning helps. Having Marvin Harrison on the other side helps. But just the way he runs routes, catches the balls, and he was a pretty solid player. He rarely ever got hurt. I just enjoyed having him on the team. So I'd have to pick Reggie Wayne and Patrick Mahomes. I bet I'm probably the only one of the few people that say Reggie Wayne is their favorite NFL player. Now, I have favorite college players, but we can save that for a different podcast. But favorite NFL player is probably Reggie Wayne.
Marvin Harrison was the one with the off the field issues, right? That was not Reggie Wayne. That's what I was thinking. So
which is crazy because Reggie Wayne, he went to Miami, and you'd think that he would have the off the field issues, but it was Marvin Harrison who had that.
Yeah. So I looked it up. Josh Allen was the other quarterback in that draft.
That's right.
So you had Darnold, Mayfield, Rosen, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Mason Rudolph was also in that draft. So very cool. So favorite draft pick of all time?
Like favorite fantasy draft pick?
Yeah.
Whew. I gotta say, drafting Mahomes in the late second round a couple years ago. I remember I needed a quarterback. I had two picks back to back. It was like 2.13 and 2.14. I needed a quarterback, and I couldn't decide DeShone Kizer or Patrick Mahomes. So I picked them both. So I was hoping one of them would hit, and obviously I think I hit on Mahomes. Kizer, not so much. I don't even know where he's at right now. So
on his couch.
Probably.
Yeah, I think Mahomes might work out for you. We'll see how this year goes, but based on what I've seen so far, he has some potential. So I live in Kansas City, and I'm at the Mahomes epicenter. It's obviously with the Super Bowl last year, and that comeback in that game was unreal, not to mention their comebacks in every other playoff game they had. Yeah. It was crazy. Mahomes, so likable as a player, but also as just a person. Seems like a really good guy, and makes it easy to cheer for him, certainly. Some of the other Chiefs, probably not so much, but Mahomes goes a long way. I think my favorite one was probably A.J. Brown last year in the draft. So he slipped down to 13, and this is in the program as well, and we have our draft pretty late in the offseason, so I think it's even after maybe preseason starts. Am I right?
Yeah, it's like August 20th, around there every year.
So I went 0-13 in 2018, had the first pick and traded down and acquired Stephon Diggs and the 13th overall pick. And with that 13th overall pick, I ended up taking A.J. Brown. I think he slipped because he had like a hamstring issue in the preseason, and so he wasn't really playing in games. He was pretty high on everybody's board, but I think it was more of an out-of-sight, out-of-mind thing. And if he's not playing in preseason, is he going to be ready to go for the season? And he's a rookie, and you worry about the rapport with the quarterback and all that stuff. So he slipped a little bit. I think DK Metcalf went in front of him, and so did N'Keal Harry. But that worked out tremendously. He was an integral part of winning that championship for me last year, and looks like he's going to be a stud for a long time to come.
He's a really good young receiver. I really like him. But he was my first Debbie pick in our Debbie league, and that was back when he was playing at Mississippi. Yeah, he's a stud. I really like him. We'll definitely talk about him quite a bit this year, I think.
Yeah, and I'm a Titans fan as well, so that makes it even better. It's a win-win there. Our next segment we're going to do is favorite memories from our fantasy careers. I'll let you start this one off, Brent. What's your favorite memory from these past 20 years now? You realize that? This will be your 21st fantasy season coming out.
That's crazy. Some good, some pretty bad. Favorite memory. This is just more of a memory and kind of a bad accomplishment too, in a way. I don't know. You're pretty young. I don't know if you remember.
I'm 30 years old, Brad. That's not that young.
But back in the 90s, the Buffalo Bills, they lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Yeah. Well,
football historian over here, man.
Well, I lost 4 fantasy championships in a row in the program league.
So this was a favorite memories section, Brett, not the.
Well, I mean, it's a memory. It's a memory. But favorite memory, I don't know. I mean,
maybe winning a league.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy losing in the championship more than winning?
I mean, it certainly looks like it. But gosh, that was probably 10 years ago when I won that league. I mean, that was pretty cool. I would say favorite memory. The first time, here we go. Here's a good one. Favorite memory in fantasy. I signed up for DraftKings. It was week 1 of the NFL season. It had to be 2015 or something like that. I can't remember. But it was week 1. I joined a league with 100 people, and I think it cost $1. I only bet $1. So obviously I'm not winning too much if I win, but I did get first place out of 100 people, and I won $80, $75. I was like, this is good. I think
and you
I'm
were hooked.
Yeah, I was thinking. I think I'm the best fantasy player around. So I decided to play more and more. I mean, I've won like that since, but not like I thought I was gonna.
It's like the gambler's fallacy right there.
Yeah, so that would probably be my favorite memory, just getting first place in my first ever DraftKings lineup.
That's pretty cool.
Let me guess what yours is.
Probably not what you think, actually.
Really? Okay, what is it?
I mean, certainly winning leagues is enjoyable, but I think my favorite memory of all time is probably it was regular season week, and I don't even remember what week it was anymore, or even what year, but it was when Michael Vick scored 50 points or something on Monday Night Football. And I was playing in my original redraft league with all my buddies. I think Michael Vick was the only player I had left to go that night. And I was down by probably 45 points. And so I needed every single yard, every single touchdown that he was accruing during that game. And I came back and won that. And I saved that screenshot of that final box score, and I send it to the guy I beat periodically just to say, hey, remember when this happened? That was probably just because of how improbable it was. And, it was Monday night, so there's only one game going on, and just sitting there watching it and being like, oh my gosh, is this actually going to happen? And watching that score slowly inch closer, and then the moment that he scored enough points for me to win, it was like, wow, that's unbelievable.
That's good. I do remember that game.
What about Have you got any of your fifth graders into fantasy football, or do any of them play outside of your
Um,
influence?
uh, there was a few of them that they talked to me and said that they play it, but I don't. I never told them that I play or anything like that. I figure there might be a parent mad at me for introducing them to some sort of gambling, I guess. But no, I have never talked to kids into playing fantasy football, but I do some pretty competitive things with them. So,
Yeah,
but nothing like fantasy
yeah.
football, though.
You're not helping them download DraftKings on their
No,
cell phones in class and set
no.
their
I
lineups.
figure I might get in a little trouble if I do that. But
That's cool. It's too bad you can't just do something like a league for your class.
yeah, that would be fun.
Teach them who's really good.
Yeah.
What about football memory in general? Do you have a favorite football memory?
Oh
Did you go
gosh.
to any of those bowl games or anything in the 90s or anything like that?
I never went to a bowl game. Just games at Lincoln. Um, let's see, 1994 or 5, one of those years. So whenever Colorado came to Nebraska, um, that was by far the best football game that I've been to. Nebraska was like number 1. Colorado was in the top 5. I remember I had end zone seats like 3 rows up. Ray Caruth, you're probably familiar with him. He's gotten in a little bit of trouble
I was
since,
gonna say, I think I remember that.
but he was cocking off to the fans back there. He's like waving his hands, saying "Bring it to the fans," and I just remember a few fans sitting by me, just screaming and yelling and cursing at him, and that was pretty cool. Nebraska won a pretty close game that game, but it was freezing that game too. It was sleeting. My hands were frozen at the beginning of the game, but once the game started, I was so into the game I didn't feel anything. I mean, I felt great.
That's
But
awesome.
that was probably the best football memory that I've had.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to be in college when Ndamukong Suh was playing at Nebraska. And
Mhm.
so watching him that entire season in person was just unreal. I've
He wa-
never seen anything like it before or since.
he was so good,
I
so good.
mean, never in a game have I just watched the line play, and except for when I was watching him in college. And that,
Yeah,
I mean, I wasn't there in person, but that Texas game was just unbelievable. If he was a hair less dominant on that last play, Nebraska wins. Time runs out
yeah,
because McCoy lost all track of time and
true,
was going to hold the ball, and Sue got pressure and he had to throw it away. So
very true.
uh, that was a lot of fun. Specific memories, I remember when Missouri came to Nebraska, it was probably, I don't remember if it was 2009 or 2010, but Missouri was pretty highly ranked, and that was the day Roy Halou set the school all-time rushing record for a single game
Hmm.
at Nebraska, which is a pretty big deal given their history of running backs and line play.
Yeah.
And then, actually, I mentioned I'm a Titans fan, and I live in Kansas City, so for my birthday this year, Shelly got me tickets to the AFC Championship game when the Titans
Oh,
played Kansas City, and she's from Kansas and a Kansas City Chiefs fan. And so it was my first time going to Arrowhead, and it was her first time other than a preseason game. And so that day, the high, I think it got up to like 15 degrees maybe, and we got there pretty early in the morning to start tailgating. And so we were just freezing our butts off at the tailgate. But it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, going in the stadium, the atmosphere is electric. It's the AFC
Mhm.
Championship. The Chiefs haven't been to the Super Bowl in forever and haven't won it in 50 years. So I didn't make a lot of friends on, on the inside, but it was pretty cool. And they were all very gracious. Of course, after the Chiefs won, that makes it a little easier, right?
Yeah.
But it was a really good time and a pretty special memory with her that I'll always have. So that was up there for sure.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I wish the result had been different. I feel like I'm talking about you and my favorite memory is losing in the fantasy football championship 4 times in a row.
Sometimes we just have to talk about just plain old memories. Doesn't have to be your favorite.
So let's see. Brent, do you want to tell the people what our plan is for when we're going to release this first real episode of this podcast and what they can look forward to?
Well, this weekend, right? This coming weekend, sometime.
Yeah, so we talked about trying to record on June 1st, which would be Monday.
Yeah.
If we end up having time this weekend, we may record a little sooner and get that out to you guys. But I think Brent alluded to it earlier. We want to go over rookie rankings as part of it. We want to talk maybe a little bit about some of the news that's been going on. So I think for every episode, we'll probably start that off with a headline or two and talk a little bit about that, and then have some segments. We'll talk about rookie rankings. We may do a little bit of a mock draft. We may do it position by position. We're going to determine that, but for next episode, it'll be focused on the rookies because we're doing a startup draft. I know a lot of people are doing rookie drafts. Some people have already done rookie drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And so tis the season, as they say.
Yes, it is.
So look forward to that coming to your favorite podcast player soon. And until then, thanks for being part of the club. I am Levi Valentine, again, at Levi_Valentine on Twitter. Brent is signing off as well, at Brent Hikus on Twitter. We like to call him Brent Hikus. It's his new nickname I just gave him tonight. He's very excited about it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right.
I've never heard that before.
We are so excited to get this off the ground, even if Brent's not excited about his new nickname. And so we really appreciate you all listening. We look forward to giving you a lot of good information and having some fun along the way. So thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.